Hi everybody, we are the Chris's, and this is a screen scribble on memory reconsolidation. And so we're going to expand on the idea that we talked about in Anatomy of the Trigger and go more into detail so that you understand what's going on. At least a little. So we talked about how the brain is a crystal ball in our last video. So the brain, the body, the nervous system acts as a prediction device. And the prediction that it generally makes about anything is if the signs happen, then we have a prediction of some kind of consequences. So our brain and body will make some kind of preparatory actions to avoid whatever those potential consequences are. So the potential consequences, where'd my pen go? Okay, try that again. There we go. So the potential consequences are what is being seen in that crystal ball. So if it is, let's say, sounds or feelings or emotions, thoughts or images, or how we feel about things, like a felt sense. I felt attacked, I felt alone. That's a felt sense. Sensations. Circumstances. That's like state-dependent memory, where we are, what's going on, maybe time of year, so the circumstances, the setting, or the surroundings, etc. So if things, these kind of inputs into our body and brain, then something happens, we think, or our body thinks something will happen. So there's outputs. Like, what does our brain and body do about it? Or some kind of response or preparatory actions, so it can change our metabolism. It can release hormones or neurotransmitters. It can activate our nervous system, ANS. That's autonomic nervous system. It can produce thoughts or emotions. It can make tension in the body or flop, it can release tension. Might trigger some beliefs or reactions. Give us urges to do things. Or it might even trigger or ascribe like some kind of meaning. That's usually a little more cognitive, but like the stuff in the background can push meanings into our cognitive brain too and make some kind of meaning of the whole thing. So this is just general. I'm about to eat, I'm not activated, but I'm about to eat, so my body produces insulin to help me digest what I'm about to eat and things like that. Or I start salivating, my digestive juices start going, or whatever. So I'm about to walk somewhere, my heart rate will increase and blood will go to my legs, and my body will prepare to walk. So whatever it is, it can be innocuous, but if it is trauma, okay, so if signs, right, it'll be danger signs if it's trauma. Then these are potential consequences. And over here, these are responses, right? And it is looking to avoid the potential consequences, so the trauma. Technically, it's looking to stop us from being re-traumatized. Yes. Okay. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. I think that's that. But this happens anytime we have inputs that go into a brain pathway. So this is a brain pathway here. That crystal ball. So these things trigger this particular crystal ball and prediction, and then we have responses based on what our brain and body think is going to happen. If it's trauma, the thing that it thinks is going to happen is something we want to avoid. But even with normal things like our body is still preparing for what's going to happen to avoid the consequences of not preparing for what is going to happen. So, we will miss the opportunity to digest sugar in our mouth if we don't salivate. Things like that, or it'll be harder to digest our food. So when we aren't even activated, our body will still have responses to various triggers. Triggers. Okay. There's two ways of working on trauma. Okay, one of them is kind of without memory reconsolidation, the way that trauma work usually works, and the way that a lot of talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and so on has tried to work. And it does sometimes achieve memory reconsolidation, but it's not it wasn't built aware of it. So it was trying to do this first method, which is basically you have this trauma prediction with the exclamation point in it. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a new prediction that is something different. So there's a question mark in there instead of an exclamation point. And what we're going to try to do is make it so that when things are happening, you go to this one, right? So things happen. And what they want to do is reinforce this one and don't do that one. But the problem is that one is still there. It's not gone. Yeah, maybe that's not a great way of explaining it. Hold on a moment. So it's trying to reinforce this one and say, hey, this is so much more attractive. Don't you want to do this instead of doing that one? And so sometimes traumas will happen. Things will get activated, and we'll notice our activation, and we'll do this. We'll kind of force ourselves into this box, and we will try to avoid activating that. But if the trauma gets too big, if the trauma is too dangerous, or there are too many of those signs getting triggered for that trauma will still end up overtaking. And so that's called a relapse, because things got so big that this one ended up getting triggered. So this is kind of how a lot of trauma work works. So we're going to think positive thoughts. We're going to tell ourselves that things will be okay. We're going to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. We're going to have like competing new path or new prediction. So this is a brain pathway or a new prediction. And we're going to do our best to reinforce this and make sure it's really strong, but the trauma response is still there. So if the trauma activation gets really big, we relapse. So what we do with memory reconsolidation is, instead of replacing our trauma response, what we do is we change it. So we'll tell you how in a moment. This old one, we kind of knock out that exclamation point. And we actually use the old brain pathway to rewrite it with new information in it. So it's the same brain pathway. This one no longer exists. It's gone. That prediction inside of it is gone. And this new one exists. There's nothing to reinforce. There's no relapse because this doesn't exist anymore. So when the signs come, they're pointing to the new pathway, which has a new response. Whoops. No relapse. It can't relapse because the pathway is just not there anymore to relapse. Now, that's not to say that a new trauma can't happen that will cause a new trauma response. So some of the same signs that have been fixed could end up being signs for a new trauma in the future, of course. But that would be a new, different pathway if that happened. Something that's helpful when attempting memory reconsolidation is something called a SUD scale. So we want to talk about this for a moment. So basically it starts with 0 down here at the bottom, which is no distress or no depression. And the right-hand side of my diagram here is hyperactive. And this side is hypoactive. And we'll describe that in a moment. So a SUD score is kind of used as a subjective rating scale from 0 to 10, from no activation to high activation. And it's used by researchers just for subjective reasons. It's not like they're taking your blood pressure, which would be an objective thing, or, checking your pulse. They are actually asking you how you feel, what your subjective sense of your activation level is. And so these are two different types of activation. On the left is more the depression and flop response, which is called hypoactive. So your energy level goes from baseline down and drops. And on the right-hand side, it's hyperactive, which is anxiety. Your anxiety level is up. So one is your anxiety level, your panic level, and that's on the right is your anxiety and panic level, and on the left is your depression, low energy, inability to function level. So that's where hopelessness is, and despair and overwhelm, in terms of like burnout. So this would be like burnout, major depression, flop. Sometimes freeze is somewhere in this also. It might have freeze response stuff. So that's all on this side. There's a lot of shame responses on this side. Direct shame. Where this side would be angry shame. Where you go on the attack and the offensive. And so that would be the other side. Okay. So what we do is we'll say, okay, how are you feeling on a 0 to 10? Or if you know what the SUD score is, we'll say, what's your SUD score? And so then you can pick a number. Say you're at a 5. You're nice in the middle. And you start trying to do memory reconsolidation stuff. Say I'm doing EFT rounds, emotional freedom technique, and I'm doing EFT rounds. Part of that is to take a SUD score and then do a few rounds of tapping with EFT and then do a SUD score again. So maybe the first time it may drop down to a 2, and now I'm feeling more, instead of a 5, at a 2, and now I know something is working and something's happening. So that's one way of telling. So I'm like, okay, I'm at a 2. I'm going to do a couple of more rounds, see if I can get down to a 1, or even to a 0, or a 0.1, or whatever. So it will allow me to bounce down the scale as things are working. Another way the SUD scale is used is, I know that before, so even if I wasn't currently activated to a 5, but I know this particular trauma generally would get me to an 8. So the trauma itself would be rated at an 8. And so I go into the session, I get myself up to like a 5 that day. I do the work. Now I'm down at 0 by the end of the session. But we want to know not only did it work within the session, but did it actually take? So a couple of weeks later, I might also check in on that particular trauma and say, okay, how am I doing? If I think of that incident, if I think about that topic, if I think about that memory, where am I now? Am I still at 0, or am I somewhere else? Or maybe the way that I pictured it while I was working on it is a little different. A good example is our camera trigger. It's not just about pointing a camera at us. We found out during a dog sit that there were other aspects of that trauma, which included somebody behind the camera giving us directions and telling us what to do. And that actually, like, we would have thought, let's say our camera trigger was a 6 before that incident, but then once we learned there was that additional incident, it was definitely more like an 8 or a 9 if somebody was giving us directions. So we found out other aspects of that trauma that we might not have known when we were trying to work on that trigger. And so the trigger's signs, the signs of what our body is thinking of as predictors of danger, we missed some of the signs and didn't work on those signs. So there are other circumstances when a camera is involved that wouldn't have gotten taken care of, and we would need to go back and work on it more because we missed aspects of it. So the SUD score and monitoring activation after trying memory reconsolidation can be helpful to find these kind of straggling circumstances that didn't get taken care of. So we might think our camera trigger is taken care of because we were thinking of people spontaneously pulling out a camera and trying to get candid photos of us. And we took care of that, and that doesn't bother us anymore. But then somebody takes out their camera and tells us, hey, smile for the camera or whatever, and then we freak out again. Because we didn't realize that getting commands was a problem. So that's an example with one of our actual traumas. So this is how memory reconsolidation actually works. And there's basically 4 steps, and this is whenever it happens, whether it's spontaneous, planned, or accidental. Spontaneous would be if it just happens in everyday life, just because of circumstances that happen, and we experience a healing event. We have a major realization, or our expectation of something going absolutely awful was completely wrong, and our whole nervous system is just like, whoa, really? That wasn't what I was expecting at all. And it totally changes everything. So this is how it works, whether it's planned or not planned, whether it's spontaneous, whether it happens in or outside of therapy, or regardless of the methods used, like the type of therapy. Is it internal family systems therapy, or is it cognitive behavioral therapy? Is it DBT? Is it EMDR? It doesn't matter. So anytime memory reconsolidation happens where the trauma response is literally gone, this is the brain mechanism by which it's happening. So the first step is we're already activated. The prediction is active already. So 1, active prediction. So we've got some sensory stuff going in. We're remembering it. We're imagining it. It's actually got some signs going on in our life, like our boss wants to speak to us in his office, and it feels a lot like when our parents wanted to speak to us about something, and so we're all jangly and, activated. Okay, so we have this information going in. Let's just say we're talking about trauma, so we'll put the exclamation point to show that this is a trauma reaction. So what happens is we have this prediction, which is the exclamation point, inside of our little crystal ball. And the crystal ball is getting all these signals, so it's activated its prediction. And then something different happens. So here's step 2. Something different. It's a prediction error. And how we feel that in our body and in our brain is something surprises us. It's an aha moment, a realization, or just something like blindsides us, or there's kind of a paradigm shift. You can feel something is different. So that's our question mark. That's like, what? What's going on? This is not what I expected. Okay. So that's our surprise moment. So we add these together. So we have to have this formula of that particular brain pathway already being active, and then introducing this prediction error. And these together, these powers combined, will open up our little crystal ball for prediction, for new data. So it opens the prediction, which is to say the brain pathway opens for new data. So that's the question mark, opens the prediction for new data. But notice this. Now, there's no particular anything in there. Actually, kind of could do this, right? So there's kind of still the the trauma prediction there. It hasn't been erased at this point. It's kind of there, but it's in flux, right? This is like nerve ganglia are opening up in our synapses, and they're like thinking, maybe we need to reattach somewhere else and make some different associations with different synapses, different nerves, but which ones? So they're still near their old pathway, and they will recombine with the old pathway if we just leave things alone at this point. So what happens? I was going to have this review with my boss, and I was all worried about it because of past reviews that went horribly, or all the times that my parents wanted to talk to me and they lectured me. So I went into my boss's office, and my boss just congratulated me and praised me about the wonderful job that I'm doing. And my brain went, buh, right? So the brain goes, buh, at that point. And we may leave that boss's office in a daze, what just happened? But we haven't necessarily learned anything new yet. If we then say unpack it with a coworker, or unpack it with a friend, or unpack it with our therapist within the 4 to 5 hour window, and do it in just the right way, what happens is we don't have the same prediction anymore, and we replace it with this new prediction error. So, whoop, that comes in, and it replaces the trauma response. So now our body and brain go, hey, when people call us into a side conversation, it doesn't have to be reprimanded. And our brain learns this, and it's like, oh, so being asked to speak to somebody privately does not have to mean that we're going to get reprimanded. And so the body kind of calms down. It's like, oh, my belongingness, in this case, my belongingness is not under threat. I'm not going to necessarily get fired and need to look for a new job. So it's because of the repetition in that 4 to 5 hour period when we talk to a friend, and we talk to, let's say we talk with 3 or 4 people about it. We tell a coworker, we tell a friend, and we tell our therapist, who we happen to be, seeing after work that day, or we text them or whatever. And we're like, hey, guess what happened? It wasn't that bad after all. And I'm so shocked, and I was so worried. And so remember, we're also pulling in that activated prediction, right? I was so worried, but look what really happened. And we bang them together a couple of times, and that prediction falls out and is replaced with the new prediction, the new learning that these things don't have to mean that it could actually mean other things. So what happens is that the inputs here, the being called into the boss's office or being pulled aside, right? Pulled aside prediction is now gone. This does not mean that necessarily all predictions that went into the old one, whoops, hey, let's not do it down there. It doesn't mean that all of these are gone, but certainly the ones that we match or mismatch are gone. So the more mismatches we have for the prediction criteria, I guess, or the signs of the prediction, the better. The more thorough this will be. But at the very minimum, for my example, this dude's like, oh, so being called into my boss's office doesn't always have to mean I'm going to be reprimanded or lose my job. So that's a good thing, right? To not be afraid of that. So that would be a spontaneous memory reconsolidation that wasn't attempting to be a memory reconsolidation. So what we really want to do, all of us with lots of trauma, raising my hand, so what we really want to do is make this a predictable process and try to get a more reliable result out of this. So there's some ways that we can kind of encourage it, I guess. And this is one of the many potential patterns for it, but this is on the brain level. There's I'm going to mix together brain level and actual level stuff here. On the brain level, it's the steps that I was just talking about. You know, the prediction, something that's a prediction error, the pathway is opened, repetition puts the new information into the pathway. So we're going to talk about those 4 steps, but in practical reality, I guess. So first off, we want to activate the prediction. So we may have a target trauma, and like we were saying with the SUDS, we'll take a SUDS level. And we want it currently to be at a 1 or more, although some methods try and keep it really low, like 0.5, 0.1, like as low as possible. So there are methods that, you don't need to activate very high in order to do this. And there are methods you don't need the original trauma, which is of supreme importance for those of us with amnesias, or where the original trauma is just so horrific that we would be too activated to do this work. So we could say, like, what was the time you were activated in the last week? What were the signs? Okay, so we're going to look at what are the signs? What are the body feels, emotions, felt sense, signals, triggers, the thoughts, the beliefs, everything that went into that incident that we're working on. So we're going to look for as many of these signs as possible, because like we were mentioning, we don't want to just take care of one. We want to try and take care of as many of these as possible. So then we need to, number 2, introduce a prediction error. And what's a wonderful thing about the body, and that this is what the prediction error is going to look like. Oh yeah, we're working on trauma. Okay, this is what a prediction error is going to look like. It's that question mark. As many ingredients as possible that are the opposites or, I guess, mismatches for these predictions. So these are going to be the balance of these, right? These go here. So, this is where discovery work comes in. This is usually your problem. And this is the discovery work portion. We're going to figure out everything about the problem possible, and then we're going to create some kind of ideas for what these mismatches will be. And then when we introduce that prediction error to the original prediction, and it opens a pathway, we still have our little shadow of our prediction there, and this is step 3. So we have the SUDS for the original problem, and we have the SUDS for our current activation when we start this process at number 1. Then we introduce the prediction error that we've designed in our discovery work, and it opens the pathway. And there's some things that we don't need to actually do the discovery work. There's some tools that are a little easier, that are a little more generic, I guess. but we introduce the prediction error. It opens up the prediction for new data. So that's 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to do step 4 more than once. Step 4 is we repeat. New learning. This is 4. And so what we're hoping to do is to start overwriting with the question mark. That's what we're hoping to do. And each time we kind of put that new prediction in again, so we're basically taking this each time, we're putting it back in. Then we will take a SUDS. This is how EFT talks about it. Take a SUDS. What's our SUDS score this time? Some methods skip this, but that's okay. So these are optional. SUDS. And SUDS. Is it going to be 4 times? I don't know. The SUDS score will tell us. Because let's say we start out, at an 8. We introduce the prediction error. It opens the pathway. Let's say we were doing an imaginal exercise with the boss. So we know next week I'm going to have a performance review. And I'm going to have to go into my boss's office. And I'm really nervous about it. So me and my therapist or my coach work on what are my fears? Like, what are my predictions? What are my fears? What are the sensory things that are going on here? And what are the predictions? So the sensory stuff going in, the predictions, what would be a good mismatch? So we do step 2. What would be a good mismatch? Well, I can visualize it going really well, but somewhere in here, there's probably also a prediction that I'm going to be really tense going in the room, that I might be sweating, maybe I broke my deodorant, that maybe I get yelled at immediately as soon as I walk in the room. I'm feeling really scared, I'm trembling, I'm nervous. So I have all these different predictions. So now in my visualization, how about I am calm? My deodorant's fine. I am confident and I walk into the room not afraid. And I'm immediately greeted with a smile and asked to take a seat or given a handshake and given a positive performance review and maybe some pointers, let's make it realistic, right? Some pointers on things that I could do better, and I take it really well, and I don't feel ashamed, and I feel very confident and proud that I did a good job, and I'm able to accept my criticism and learn from it and thank them for their feedback, and then I leave the room. So my visualization is like totally off the rails different. I have this ideal is a good word, this ideal interaction with my boss. So that's my visualization. That's my plan for doing this. So we have the visualization. It opens up the pathway. Then we repeat the visualization, right? We do it at least once more. And then we do a SUDS, okay? So what I had before was an 8. And now I do a SUDS. And my SUDS is a 4, let's say, at that point. Like, okay, I'm still feeling kind of nervous. I'm not sure this is going to work. I'm having a hard time visualizing, whatever. We do the visualization a 3rd time. Okay, what's my SUDS now? A 2. Okay, what's left? What are my feelings in my body when I have that 2? Like we can do a test in between each time. Like, what's the feelings that are left? Sweaty palms. Oh, we didn't think of that before. There's no deodorant where palms are. We didn't think about sweaty palms. Okay, so you don't want to shake the boss's hand with sweaty palms. So we're going to picture specifically, how dry and pleasantly warm your hands are, and you're going to shake your boss's hands confidently, and we'll tweak the visualization to take care of any of those residual symptoms. And so now we're at a 2, and what's left at a 2? At a 2, it's just like, yeah, I'm just like still a little worried that, that this might not go down the way we're thinking about, that there's still like a hidden agenda or something. I'm just a little worried. Okay, so then we go back in and we tweak the visualization, like what can we do about worry? Let's say you did something that's, we have this thing about plan, don't predict. So we said, okay, so let's take care of those worries before you even have the meeting. You can email your boss your own personal agenda of certain things that you want to talk about during the meeting, or you can, find some way of like building confidence before you even get to the room. And so, then I would definitely be less worried if that were the case. So you change the visualization and you do it again. And now maybe the SUDS is 0 already and we don't need this extra one. We're like, oh, it's at a 0. This is awesome. So we're done, and we did these 4 repetitions. So we did the first one and then we did 3 repetitions. So 4 total, and it's at a 0. So now we'd have a test. The test would be the actual performance review in this case. And afterwards we would unpack how it went. But other ways of doing it is like a week or 2 later, another SUDS would be done, but we would try to do a visualization to try to evoke the feelings if there hadn't been an actual performance review. With the actual performance review, we could just review how it went and anything that came up and work on that. But if this is like a old trauma or something that's not actively going on in life, we would do a SUDS and do some visualization work like the next meeting or the next meeting after that, and see if there's anything that we left out, that was forgotten, any of the, use a different color, any more of these that might still be hanging around, that maybe it's, now it's a 3. So now we'd make a new visualization. We'd go, bang the visualization against this 3 prediction. So we'd have like a new prediction, and then we'd have a new prediction error. We'd introduce the new prediction error, try and get it to take, and then do a SUDS, and maybe because it started out only at a 3, maybe it's already a 2 or a 1, and maybe we only need, let's say, 2 repetitions because we'd already knocked out so many of the predictions up here. I hope that makes sense. I know I made a mess of the screen. So, to review, pick another color. Okay. So, to review, memory reconsolidation, we need to activate the prediction. So, this is basically low-level anxiety. You want like a 1 to a 3, although there are methods that do, not memory reconsolidation methods, but the wrappers around memory reconsolidation that can handle higher levels of activation than a 1 to a 3. Then we introduce some kind of a prediction error, and there are already some scripts and things that work for people that have pretty reliable prediction errors going for them, and we'll talk about some of that in a moment. Then, because these 2 added together, these 2 added together equal a pathway open for editing, and then the new learning is repeated into that open pathway equals MR. And this is repeatable. This process, very simple 4 steps, is repeatable, but it's not always reliable. Now, let's talk about that. So sometimes there are problems with achieving memory reconsolidation. Because it's very simple and there's those 4 steps, things can go off the rails at any of those steps, including simply having the wrong pathway to start with or the wrong prediction. So you might be thinking about working on shame, but you've accidentally, I don't know, like triggered a trauma about something else. Like, so the thing you think you're working on is not the thing that you've activated in your brain and body. So though you have a SUD score of whatever, the mismatch doesn't match the trauma because the trauma you think you're working on is not the one currently activated. Or you could have a SUD score of 0 and nothing is activated right now. And the way to know if you're just like cognitively thinking of something versus actually having the prediction activated is to check in with your body. And that's why the SUD score is helpful. It's not always necessary, but that's where the SUD score does come in because it helps you to check with your body. How activated are you right now? Then another issue can be we have a pathway, it can't be the wrong one, like we are activated, and now we're trying to work on what we're activated with, but the mismatch or the prediction error doesn't work for some reason. It's just not enough, or it's not hitting those predictions. It's not hitting the signs. So the mismatch or prediction error is falling short. It's not hitting that particular level of your nervous system because it's not visceral enough. It's too cognitive. So make it experiential. Your feels, feels or emotions or senses, etc. Or it, for whatever reason, doesn't actually derail the prediction. So, like if I'm trying to work on, what was the one that I was just using earlier? Oh, the camera. So, like we were talking about, where maybe we think the problem is somebody pointing a camera at us spontaneously, but the real problem is somebody directing us while we're on camera and telling us what to do. So the mismatch or prediction error is insufficient. It falls short because it's not derailing the full prediction in this case. We could be mistaken about what the prediction is and be like working on the wrong thing, basically. So if it's just like any camera, what if somebody points a 1970s camera at us? What if we think it's only cameras, but it also includes video? What else? It could be like because we weren't always alone. So maybe we think of only situations where somebody's pointing a camera at only us and only our body, but not when there's somebody, say, an age mate or a friend who's also being directed and on camera with us. Or it could also include watching other people being directed on camera. That might also, now that we think of it, be another one because we weren't alone and sometimes we were the ones holding the camera. So that's another issue. Like witness trauma and vicarious trauma and survivor guilt, and so there's like all these layers that we would have to think of in doing a visualization that would totally take care of the trauma, but it still would probably take the overall trauma, like some of the triggers that go into our crystal ball would probably, some of them, be eliminated. And then the other thing is sometimes, the pathway opens up, but we don't repeat the learning. or don't repeat it in a visceral enough way for our nervous system to really get the message. So a good example of that would be if I am too cerebral. And so, I have this new realization, but now I'm going to journal about it. And I journal about it like I'm writing an encyclopedia entry rather than writing my visceral reactions. I'm not writing about my surprise. I'm not writing about my feelings before and after. I'm not writing about the lived experience of it. I'm kind of detached from it, and I'm watching myself from outside, and I'm like writing it like a newspaper reporter rather than writing it like a memoir. So, that's to say that even journaling might work in the first place, but usually you'll want to tell somebody about it or re-experience it, visualize it, go over the circumstances again within that window and make it as lived experience as possible, as much in your body or with your body or from your body's point of view. Because it's really your body that's holding the trauma and not your mind per se. That makes sense, I hope. Is there anything else for this slide? No, I think not. What's next? I don't know. Oh, okay. So, we wanted to give some examples of the wrappers or methods. These are, whether they're self-help, here at the top, things you can do by yourself, methods of achieving memory reconsolidation, or the more clinician-led methods down here at the bottom. So these are some things that, there are methods of self-help. Let's say rescue missions. Sometimes there's things that happen during rescue missions that may include memory reconsolidation. Certainly, even just taking a trauma holder out of the there and then into the here and now, or them spontaneously coming into the here and now, lowers the activation level. The trauma and the triggers still may be there, but something about it has definitely changed. Something about the lived experience. So that means some of the squiggles going into the crystal ball have definitely changed. So maybe we knocked out one of them by bringing them into the here and now. So this is definitely a win. It doesn't mean that there's not other things that can trigger them going back into a trauma response, but it is definitely a very different experience for everybody involved in our body. So that's one. That's a self-help method. Spontaneous. We were talking about one with the boss and stuff like that. That would be a spontaneous mismatch and a spontaneous memory reconsolidation. EFT is both done by clinicians, but also something you can learn and use at home. I'm sure there's videos online. You can go to EmoFree. EmoFree.com. And we have an article about it on kinhost.org about EFT. So EFT is a home use tapping method that can produce memory reconsolidation. And knowing about memory reconsolidation might help because you can modify the methods to more reliably come up with mismatches and reinforce memory reconsolidation with other methods. One that we've found recently is called the Ideal Parent Figure Protocol, which is a visualization of imaginary ideal parents who kind of take you through a little bit of a journey through 5, and if you get our recording 6 different the original 5 are like attachment parenting issues. So like filling early childhood needs for validation, safety, understanding, being interested in the child, and things like that. Like really early, very visceral attachment issues. So if you have traumas that you can't put a finger on for a very long time, or, you know, even if you haven't been working on this for a long time, but you know there was early childhood issues and attachment issues with your parents, and you can't put words to it because it's pre-verbal, this is an excellent method. It will work for things like after that, like let's say preschooler or even school age kids and things like that. But where it really shines is hitting those really early pre-verbal, like 0 to 3, kind of parental insufficiency, let's call it. So basically you can become a toddler or a baby or an infant and go back into this visualization and take care of super early childhood issues. And you'll know if you need this because you'll have extremely young trauma holders in your system. So your system kids will be in this 0 to 3. And we had Sweet Pea have Sweet Pea, and Sweet Pea is 6 months old, 6 to 9 months old. And we have Tootie, who's like a year and a half, and so on. So like we know we have really, really early disturbances, let's call it. We have our own recording of it, but you can find Dan Brown's. He's one of the originators of this, and he has a recording on YouTube, so you can find the Dan Brown. We have an article about it on kinhost.org. You can read more about it, and we tell you what the 5, let's say, touchstones are. And our own recording, which we will probably put up on Many Minds on the Issue podcast soon, which we add one more to it, which is expressing your needs and wants to your parents, and your parents taking it really well and responding and trying to give you what you need. Because that's a specific issue we had, and we added it to this because we figured other people probably have the same problem, so it wouldn't hurt to add that. There are alternatives to ideal parent figure that can be ideal fairy godmother, ideal friend, ideal partner, ideal godparents, guide parents, caregivers. Like we can replace the idea and record our own recordings. It is hard to surprise ourselves, but because this is such a visceral, experienced visualization, it actually can, even though you record your own. But it might be nice to have a friend help you with it. And, you know, this way it's not your own voice. But anyway, so we do have a recording for that. If folks like our voice more than Dan Brown's voice or something. Okay. So then there's the clinician-led methods. And that includes, again, the same thing, EFT, EMDR, which if you have CPTSD, you want the modified version of EMDR. But EMDR also can achieve memory reconsolidation. Accelerated resolution therapy works on a very low activation. EMDR works on a higher activation. It actually tries to go back to the quote-unquote original trauma, which is one of the reasons it can be very flooding. But ART tries to really keep you down in the 0 to 3 SUDS level, possibly as close to 0 as possible. And the therapist is trained to basically watch you and see if your activation is getting higher and watch for dissociation and stuff like that, so that they know if you're going off the rails. So ART is very gentle. where EMDR can be very activating. So, hypnosis can possibly achieve memory reconsolidation. We don't like hypnosis for a bunch of reasons, but I guess people do like it, and it would depend on how it's being used. But hypnosis, like any of the visualization methods, can still go places and take you places in a experiential sense, that it might be hard for some people to visualize themselves into. Other therapy methods, basically any method that actually resolves trauma without relapse, is hitting memory reconsolidation. So other therapy methods can achieve memory reconsolidation. Somatic processing is a pretty new one, very body-based, that can also help out with this. The more folks using these methods know about the 4 steps of memory reconsolidation, the more they can tweak and ensure that their methods hit them, so that you get the repetition, so that you make sure that you've got the trauma activated before you start, even if you're constantly lowering that activation level to be below a 1. You still know which trauma you're working on, and you are checking in with your body during this to see what you feel. So it's like, oh, okay, how do you feel? What do you feel in your body? Oh, my stomach is feeling weird. Okay, so we're going to go back in, and so they do that over and over again. So there's repetition, and this is why it works. We loved this method because it was very low activation. It didn't require us talking to the therapist about what was going on, which is another problem with EMDR. So EMDR, like we said, is very activating. ART, the therapist didn't need to know. We didn't have to worry about traumatizing our therapist by talking about things. So yeah. And that's our last slide. So what we're going to do is we're going to make one more because we want to talk about our references here. So the credits for references. Alain Brunet, I'm going to assume because it's French, is from Quebec. And this is the person who talks about, uses memory reconsolidation in regard to trauma. The person who introduced us to it is Alan Parry, who's in the UK. Then we have Daniel Brown. I think he's in the US. Yes. And that's the Ideal Parent Figure Protocol. I believe he has left us. But he wrote that book with, I forget. But we have the references for the Ideal Parent Figure Protocol on kinhouse.org, including some of the studies done with it. So you can look that up. Oh, and this dude is with the Douglas Research Center. Gotta make that RE Center. So this is some of our references for having made this video. And we added in information, of course, from things we know already, like EFT and ART. And we hope this information is helpful. And we will continue to be putting out more information. Also check out kinhost.org. If you scroll down on the homepage, there's a section that gives like the latest 50 or however many edited posts. So if you look there, at least, eventually they'll disappear from there. But if you look there, you'll find the latest articles that we've been writing, and we've been adding stuff on memory reconsolidation, trauma work, Ideal Parent Figure Protocol, 4 blinks. We will soon be doing rewind method, And so we're basically starting to talk about different tools that can achieve memory reconsolidation. You may want to send this video to your therapist if you are interested in chasing down ways to get more memory reconsolidation for yourself, or if you want to use the ideal parent figure protocol in conjunction with your therapist, and so on. So do show this to your trauma team and stuff like that, and we hope that works for y'all. Good luck. Wow, that was a whole hour. Okay, bye.